Welcome to the inaugural session of the two-day international webinar on Mapping China's Rise, Regional Assessment, conducted by Department of Political Science, University of Kerala. Now I welcome Dr. Josukutty, CA, Organizing Secretary, and Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Kerala, to deliver the welcome address. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rukmini. First of all, let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined this seminar from different parts of India and the world. And as you all know that this is an online seminar and we will have to stick to the time schedule so that we begin the next sessions. As you all know, the topic of our seminar is Mapping China's Rise, Regional Assessments. As you know, China's rise is perhaps the most important geopolitical event in global politics today. And this has been the talk of the town in international politics for many years, and it continues to be so, and it will be so for many years to come. So it raises a number of questions for all those who are interested in international relations and global politics. And that is precisely the reason why we have organized this seminar to understand China's rise and what would be its impact in different parts of the world. How is China engaging different regions of the world? What are the means that it is using to spread its influence in different parts of the world? How is it related to China's dream of achieving a prosperous great power status? And many more questions that we are trying to answer through this seminar. So there will be very lively discussions and presentations. And also we would be discussing how different regions and countries are responding to China's rise. So with this few words, let me welcome the presenters of the inaugural session. First of all, let me welcome all the participants who have joined this seminar from different parts of the world. And the inaugural session is chaired by Professor Dr. Suresh, who is currently the chairman of the Department of Political Science, University of Kerala. So it is my privilege to welcome Dr. Suresh to chair the session. Dr. Suresh, welcome. And then I take this opportunity to welcome Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, who needs no introduction. Whoever has read on and studied on China cannot escape without reading Professor Kondapalli. He is Professor Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and he is a very good friend of the Department of Political Science. He has been associated with us in many capacities. So, in fact, it is a privilege to have Professor Srikanth Kondapalli as the keynote to deliver the keynote address. Sir, a hearty welcome to you to this important
Thank you very much.
Seminar.
Sir, mic in endo problem. Josukutty sir.
Yeah, now
it is clear.
Did I miss something in between? Meanwhile, I invited Professor Kondapalli to deliver the keynote address.
Yes.
Hope you have heard.
Yes. Shall I then?
Yes, sir, please.
Sir, actually, I would like to invite Professor Suresh, who's chairing the session.
Sorry for that. Yeah. I'm sorry about it, Professor Suresh, please.
Okay, it is all right. Okay, all right. Thank you, Professor Josukutty, for the initial remarks. And we are, in fact, privileged to organize such an international webinar, and that too on a very important topic, mapping China's rise, regional assessment. I think that it is, in fact, a golden opportunity for the scholars of international relations to assess China's rise in the emerging global scenario. So I think that we must start with the domestic issues which are there in China, especially the system of government and also the importance of this one country, two system, and how far China is able to rise up to the expectation of the people in a more say democratic, and the aspirations of human rights are they are visible throughout the world. And in that particular context, that how China is going to face these challenges in the domestic front, and also in the external sphere, of course. China is also, of course, I agree with that, both in terms of economic power and military power, which are the two dominant manifestations of national power, where China is on the rise. But at the same time, of course, if China's external policy or external approach is concerned, of course, there are certain apprehensions, like how they have combined the civil-military integration, and how it differs from the approach which were in the international domain for a long time, and how China would face the trade war, especially with the EU or United States of America or Australia. And of course, in the Indo-Pacific region, the emergence of Quad, even though it is not a military alliance, or there is no military component in that, but at the same time, how far China is able to face the challenge posed by this Quad, especially when they work for a free and uninterrupted international trade, and the acceptance of internationally accepted norms in the bilateral and multilateral spheres, and how China is able to face these challenges. That would be of great interest to all students of international relation. And we are so fortunate to have an eminent person to inaugurate and to deliver the keynote address, Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. And we have an array of eminent scholars, not only from India, but from abroad, especially from China, Malaysia, and many more countries. And we are so, in fact, we are privileged and proud to organize this seminar. And I welcome you all to the Department of Political Science and of the University of Kerala. And now I wish all the very best to the two-day interactions, the international webinar on mapping China's rise and regional assessment. Thank you. Thank you.
Now let's welcome the eminent speaker, Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU, to deliver the keynote address. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Greetings to you all. I see that 69 of us are logged in. That's a huge number. And let me congratulate the Department of Political Science, University of Kerala, for organizing this seminar. Let me thank Dr. Josukutty Abraham and Professor Suresh for this. And thank you, Rukmini, for the invite. Greetings to you all. This is a very important topic that the Department of Political Science had chosen for this year's international conference. Let me congratulate the organizers for choosing such a very important and comprehensive subject, because we are all affected by China's rise across the globe. So this is a very important topic, and the title is also very tantalizing, mapping China's rise and the regional assessments. Because China's rise is affecting each nook and corner of the world today, as it has become the largest trading partner for over 130 countries. And it has also expanded its core interests, which were enunciated by Dai Pingko previously in 2009. But we see more additions have come up to the core interests. This suggests that it is also affecting the neighborhood. For example, last year we faced the Galwan incident in June 2020, not last year, 1.5 years ago. So it also has a certain irredentist claims, and China rise is also affecting the global and regional orders. As the 19th Communist Party Congress mentioned, the work report of General Secretary Xi Jinping mentioned about the China's desire to occupy the center stage in the global and regional orders. This is also one of the key areas where we witness the impact of rise of China. With this brief preface, let me take the concrete aspects of China rise. We all know that China is now the second largest economy after the United States, with nearly $16.9 trillion of GDP. But when we look at the previous period, it was only $144 billion when the reform program was initiated in 1978. The four modernizations program was initiated. By 2010, China displaced Japan as the second largest economy with over $5.8 trillion. And today it is over $16 trillion. China had experienced 10% growth rate on an average between 1978 to 2005. Since 2010, there has been a decline in growth rates. For example, 2020, China had a growth rate of 2.3%, as against nearly 14% in 1994. So there has been a reduction in growth rates, but we all know that is because of the novel coronavirus that spread across the globe and that contracted the supply chain and other value chains across the globe. And this is probably an exception. 2021, the year that just passed away, they were expecting about 5.1% growth rate. So from 10% to what they call as medium high, between 6 to 8%, but last year 5.1% is the estimated growth rate. One of the consequences of this is the increase in trade between China and other countries, because the special economic zones that were established were basically export processing zones with joint venture companies collaborated with the multinational corporations. So exports, which were just about $20 billion in 1978, they became $84 billion, 4 times by 1992 when Deng Xiaoping visited Shenzhen and Zhuhai as part of the Southern Tour to attract FDI from abroad. The trade increased to $762 billion in 2005 and to $1.2 trillion in 2010 and to the nearly $3 trillion by last year. So an increase from $20 billion to nearly $3 trillion. That is the concrete effect of China's rise. China was about, it accounted for 1% of global trade previously. Now it's nearly 12 to 13% of global trade growth. And so this is the main factor behind China's rise, which is our subject matter today. So economic aspects are the crucial ones. So let us look at some of the figures. For instance, China today is accounting for 1/5 of the global savings. And it was just about 5% some 3-4 decades ago. And today they save roughly about 45% of the GDP, and the state-owned banks have an assets of over $50 trillion. That's the scale of acquisitions in China. So this is reflected in terms of commodities. For instance, they produced nearly 1,000 million tons of crude steel. That accounts for about 56% of global output. In terms of copper, 1.7 million metric tons of copper. So that's the third largest after Chile and other South American countries. Last year again, China produced cement, which is about 2 billion metric tons. That's nearly 54% of global production. It's also the second largest importer of energy resources from West Asia, from Central Asia, and increasingly from Russia recently. It is also the largest investor in resources, energy resources, especially in Sudan, Angola, Nigeria, Kazakhstan, Iran, in the south parts oil wells, and in Venezuela. It is the largest producer of automobiles, 24 million units produced in 2020. And this figure goes on in terms of mentioning about the phenomena of China's rise. Let us look at this phenomena from domestic debates within China. In the case of China, the domestic angle is very important. And we come across in the scholarship, in the leadership assessments, various views on China's rise. Deng Xiaoping had proposed the Tao Guang Yang Hui, that is keeping a low profile, roughly translated. And that included the focus on economics. Qingqi Chungxin, as he would say, apart from all other aspects of Tao Guang Yang Hui, one of the most important aspects is economics at the center. So as a result, since 1978 reform program, economics, agriculture, industry, science and technology, and defense related were emphasized. And this is where we see China catapulting, because the leadership mentioned periodically of doubling or quadrupling the GDP of China. And I just enumerated those figures for the GDP increase in China. Today, under Xi Jinping, there is a new philosophy, new guideline, as they would say, which is Fan Fa Your Way, which is roughly translated as accomplishing something. Many of these concepts come with very broad translations, because many of these cannot be translated, as these are cultural constructs. Now, there is a huge focus on what China can accomplish in the regional and global orders. And this is the focus of Fan Fa Your Way, which I will mention in the assessment later on. But to turn to the scholarship in China, Man Honghua, Yan Xuetong, Wang Yichou, Shu Yinhong, Qin San Rong, and a few other scholars, what we get across is a few codifications on China's rise. In Chinese scholarship, they neatly divide China's rise from the kind of views that scholars and officials have. For example, China's rise is seen to have triggered roughly about 7 phenomena. Chungko Chi Yu Lun, that is China as a favorable opportunity. Now, many a multinational company had chosen China as the area for expanding their businesses. Some 120,000 or 120,000 MNCs have now taken China as their field area for expanding their businesses. So this is a favorable opportunity, including Indian companies like NIIT, like Wipro, like Infosys, like Ranbaxy, like Tatas, or the 70,000 MNCs from United States who made China as their home, or nearly $280 billion of investment that Taiwan made in China, or nearly $300 billion that Japan made in China, or South Korea, or Singapore, or European Union countries, and so on. So China is seen as a favorable opportunity because the wage labor is pretty low, and China provided subsidized land, electricity, and tax holidays and other incentives for the investors to invest and export. This model has now become under stress with the Trump administration previously and Biden administration following the decoupling process. So this is under stress relatively, with many American companies or European or East Asian companies, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, shifting their base towards Southeast Asia or India or other countries, Bangladesh or other countries. The second school of thought the Chinese mention is Chungko Kungshan Lun, or China's contribution. Any rising country would need to provide for their contribution to the humanity. Of course, we know China contributed to that Suta farming, or the 4 great inventions we all studied during our childhood. But that is not enough. If China is rising today, it has to contribute to the public goods and services to the international community, as previously United States and the Soviet Union provided as the 2 superpowers when they had risen. So this is a gaping hole in China's contribution to the global community. The third is the China threat theory, or Chungko Weishie Lun. This is more prominent among scholars abroad, and this is where probably in the 2-day discussions we will have today and tomorrow, many scholars would be mentioning about this China threat theory, which is quite prominent among scholars abroad. This is one which was triggered by Gordon Chang's coming collapse of China and the threat that could possibly emanate for their respective national interests. Since I mentioned Gordon Chang, he is known for this Chungko Pankui Lun, that is China collapse theory. He argued that the state-owned banks have huge assets, nearly $50 trillion. But like in many countries where the state is owning these banks, we are very familiar with India, with the non-performing assets. The cases of Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, or others. We are very familiar in India about these cases of non-performing assets. So he argued that China would collapse if these continue. We did see last year President Xi Jinping initiating the regulations on fintechs, edtechs, film industry, culture industry, on car hailing apps like TT Chuxing or others. So there is a mid-course correction and a new disruption has been introduced in this. A fifth school is something akin to the first one on the favorable opportunity. China is a favorable opportunity. Chungko Chingchi Shui Fan Lun, that is economic moisture theory. Then you have also a recent school that has emerged, Chungko Auman Lun, that is China arrogance theory. As China is rising, there is some scholars argue that China has become much more arrogant. When we look at the case of Sri Lanka, Nepal, or Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, or other countries, there is many Chinese diplomats do exhibit that kind of arrogance. We did see such a situation with the Americans or with the Soviets before. Today, rise of China is also creating that kind of a new situation, arrogance. Finally, there is also the China responsibility theory. This has been triggered with Wolfowitz suggesting that China should be a responsible stakeholder. And of course, the Chinese said they're always responsible. And China rise needed the public goods to be taken care of. That is the hegemonic stability theory. And most important, leadership on the high seas. We did see some forward momentum in China with the two major conferences on the Central Conference on Foreign Relations, foreign work conferences in 2015 and 2018. These have proposed the new format of outreach in the maritime domain and in the global domain by China. The three white papers that were issued during Xi Jinping's term, 2013, 2015, and 2019, they also mention about China's increasing role on the maritime domain. We did see, as a part of this, China initiating since 2008 nearly 36 rounds of Somali counter-piracy operations or in other domains. But this is still not enough. As one estimate put it, China is still subsidized by the United States for this high seas protection. John Garver mentioned a figure of nearly $350 billion a year. So in other words, the China responsibility theory is still problematic. There are a few other broad theories that came up as part of China's rise. One is Thacha Lun, that is hitchhike theory. Shrutai Putung Lun, that is distinct era theory. Shin Renshu Lun, that is new understanding theory, that the Chinese government's policies need to be understood, that they are contending for hegemony with the United States. So that need to be considered by the international community. It is not clear what would the international community would get if China opposes the US. We know that China's rise was contributed by the US since Henry Kissinger's visit and his engagement policies, which have now come under stress during the Trump administration onwards. With this brief internal assessment on various aspects of China's rise, we see that it also has connections to the adjustments with the neighborhood and beyond. Foreign Minister Wang Yi, speaking at the Brookings Institution in 2013 September, said 11 out of 15 cases of rise of countries led to violence. And Yan Xuetung defined the rise as a gap between the emerging country and the previous dominant country. So catching up and surpassing is crucial for this understanding. Luo Yuan of the Academy of Military Science suggested a different configuration, which is molding the international environment as the next stage in China's rise. So we see that while China had introduced the domestic consumption and dual circulation strategy of less dependence on the outside world for its exports, and Made in China 2025, which will have probably a majority of the items sourced from inside China. So we do see some tension in terms of economic interdependence with the rest of the world. Nevertheless, we did see that because the economic interdependence is still pretty high, we probably will see China continuing its dependence with the outside world in terms of trade partnerships or free trade areas, RCEP or CPTPP in future. So with this brief background on domestic assessments on China's rise, let me quickly shift over to the regional assessments. First, the global. China's rise had impacted on the global order. We have seen the China proposing multipolarity and others. It has also mentioned about the UN Charter as the basis, especially in terms of Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo conflicts or others. We have also seen China advocating reform in the Bretton Woods institutions. And in the meanwhile, their voting rights have been increased in the IMF, International Monetary Fund. It has also established the AIIB, New Development Bank of the BRICS, along with the other countries, and also has different positions in the international arms control and disarmament, on the nuclear issues, on recently outer space related, or others. So China's rise has created this dichotomy between Washington consensus and Beijing consensus. We also frequently refer to recently Mumbai consensus as a middle path between US and China. So China rise has also triggered, of course, this is part of the India rise, the Mumbai consensus. So one of the things that we need to remember is China's rise had led to the global order getting tweaked in many ways. This is first reflected in the comprehensive national power. Recently, the Lowy Institute had come up with the figures for this CNP, Comprehensive National Power, which suggested to China becoming the second largest in the comprehensive national power. Although there is a slight decline in their indicators, there is nevertheless the aspect of China increasing its comprehensive national power. So regional assessments, number one, most assessments have been positive with rise of China because it has economic aspects. So when Cheng Pijian raised this concept of China's rise, Malaysians protested by saying that their automobile industry would be affected with China's rise. So this can be viewed from economic competition perspective, but it also has a certain military component because China's rise resulted in double-digit increases in military expenditure. So much so today it has become the second largest defense budget in the world after the Pentagon. We do not know the clear picture about the actual investments, but they have mentioned about $209 billion as their allocation. Allocation, not the real expenditure. Some argue that this is around $350 billion. The Rand Corporation, the CIPRI, the other AGDA or other mention about very high expenditure by China in the defense field, which is also part of the China's rise. So as a result, we have seen the tensions in the neighborhood increasing. A second aspect is it has also certain impact on the regional order. We have seen, for example, in the economic sphere, Belt and Road Initiative, RCEP, many others did create alternative sources of financing, infrastructure, and others, which is much needed as the Bretton Woods institutions have not been able to provide such alternative financing. Of course, today the G7 extended meeting in UK last year had suggested to build back better world as an alternative for the financing options for infrastructure across the globe with over $45 trillion estimated allocation. The Belt and Road Initiative suffer from China's unilateral policies, state-owned enterprises being the main beneficiaries in contracts. Some of these projects are mired in debt diplomacy, as the recent aid data suggested. There are also violations in sovereignty, like the CPEC projects in Pakistan, where China intruded into Kashmir, and environmental degradation or lack of transparency in such transactions. In terms of public goods provision, there is the 5 connectivities of the Belt and Road Initiative that China has been pushing through. But it is still not clear how China would produce these for the benefit of the global community. A next assessment possibly could be the China's rise has created a lot of nationalism in China and emboldened the leadership to expand the core interests. Initially, Dai Pingkou in 2009 mentioned Tibet and Taiwan, but today it also includes South China Sea, Senkaku Islands, and they mentioned unilaterally that Galwan always belonged to China. Previously, they mentioned it is a disputed territory, but now increasingly saying it belongs to China. No evidence was provided for the Chinese ownership, if any, of Galwan, nor it has been discussed in the special representative meetings or in the border talks previously. So unilateral assertions like these created a lot of tension. But most important also, a Global Times journalist, Shen Chiwei, mentioned that Vladivostok belonged to China or Kazakhstan belonged to China. So China rise has created some trouble in the neighborhood. We are familiar with the South China Sea dispute, where they simply own the whole of nearly 80% of 3.2 million square kilometers under the 9-dashed line, an imaginary line which was quashed by the Hague Tribunal, yet China does not bother about the international law in this sphere. But most important, as the Department of Political Science is organizing this conference on mapping China's rise, it is also important for us, not far away from Trivandrum, Thiruvananthapuram, the 7 expeditions of Changha also landed in Cochin, Calicut, and Quilon in 1409, 1411, and we saw that during their trips, the Changha's sailors also divided or tried to divide and rule the Zamorins, which is famous for the spice trade and other things. There was another expedition to Sri Lanka in 1409 in which King Alagakunara was kidnapped by the sailors and sent to China in 1411, but he was brought back and restored to power. 50,000 sailors marched into this kingdom. They mentioned that the king had gross lack of respect and plotting against the fleet as the reasons for his kidnapping. It is quite possible many leaders in these countries could probably behave in the same manner in future. So the prospects of China's rise would be kidnapping of these or displacing leadership. We did see such consequences in Nepal. We are seeing that in Sri Lanka once again after 6 centuries. So this is one other consequence of China's rise. That is broadly contestation of power of the dominant powers of that region. So rise of China had created this new situation. If you look at East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Central Asia, there is the China's increasing balancing or even domination of the dominant powers in this. So let me stop here. I've taken enough time. And let me congratulate the Department of Political Science for reassessing China's rise and what it means for the regions across the globe and specifically in Asia. There are both positives as well as negatives, but an increasingly nationalist China would also start encroaching on others' interests. And the case of the Zamorins and the expedition, which was of course aborted to Bengal, also indicated. So we have several scenarios of what China's rise could mean in the overall regional and global context. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kondapalli, for that elaborate and very reflective address. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Anu Unni, the Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Kerala, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Rukmini. We have had a great start with, to this two-day international webinar on mapping China's rise regional assessments with the keynote address delivered by none other than Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, who is an expert in Chinese studies. Whenever we do research on China, he is someone whom we depend upon for gathering all information. This is in the last 2 months, this is the second time I'm getting an opportunity to listen to him. Last month, we had a refresher course at JNU. So he was one of the speakers. He gave an extensive lecture on trends in China's IR theory. He was taking us through different theories, realism, Marxism, constructivism, so on and so forth. That was one of the most intellectually stimulating sessions we had in the last 8th refresher course in JNU. So it's always a pleasure to listen to Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. He had written a book in this pandemic time, China and pandemic, domestic and external dimensions. That may be one of the best books our students can probably look into to know more about China. It's great to see you, sir, again here on behalf of the Department of Political Science. It's our pleasure and privilege to get you to deliver this keynote address on behalf of the faculty members, our students. We express our sincere thanks to you, sir. Thank you very much. This session was chaired by none other than the head of the department, Department of Political Science, Dr. Suresh R. He's someone who assists us in organizing all kinds of academic activities. We have just begun with this seminar, and within some days we would be having another seminar as well. So under his initiative, the department has actually flourished. We are taking number of not only seminars, we are engaging with we have started with many extension activities as well under his initiative. So he's someone who motivates faculty members, students always. He's an expert in maritime studies, so probably this would be an area which interests him as well. I think for organizing this seminar, he was one of the motivating source for Professor Josukutty. Thank you very much, sir, for chairing the session. I would like to thank Professor Josukutty, sir, for organizing this two-day international webinar, for providing us this platform, especially for those students who are doing research on China. I'm sure that this webinar is going to be really useful. If this pandemic had not affected us, we would have we all had got an opportunity to interact with all of us and meet the paper presenters and engage with them. But anyway, Professor Josukutty has organized many seminars in the past. On China, he has organized an international seminar. I remember it quite well, and on many other, on US, on different aspects of global politics, he has organized many seminars in the past. So this is not a this is just a continuation for him. Thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity, and I'm sure that he will continue to organize many more webinars and seminars in the coming future as well. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank the Chinese scholars who have joined with us. As the seminar is on mapping China's rise regional assessments, this webinar would be incomplete without listening to the Chinese experts. So thank you. I would like to thank all professors who have joined from China and from other parts of the world for this today webinar. I would like to thank faculty members who have joined from different institutions. I would like to thank the students, MA students and research scholars from our department and from other institutions as well for being part of this inaugural session. Within some time, I think we would be going to the first session. Thanking each and every one of us. I hope we would be having very fruitful sessions today and tomorrow. I wish all the very best for the proceedings. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Anu ma'am, for the word of thanks. And we have like 7 more minutes until the next session. So if the participants or the audience have any questions, you can post in the chat box or you can unmute and ask the questions to Professor Konnapalli.
Rukmini, can I ask a question? Hello, Rukmini?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah. Sir, Professor, sir, you have made an extensive mapping of China's domestic and international interactions. And sir, see, if you look into China, of course, you have looked into the economic growth and the military might of China and the expansionist policy that they were pursuing with the neighboring countries. and also in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. But coming to the system, the political system which is prevalent in China, sir, what would be your assessment that how far it is in congruence with the emerging movements towards democracy and human rights protection?
Thank you very much, Professor Suresh. That's a very interesting and a little bit controversial question as well, because the Chinese have come out with a white paper on democracy, and they also came out with a white paper on human rights, and they suggested that they follow a certain democracy. And they have also protection of human rights from the point of view of sustainable economic development. Of course, we are Department of Political Science would define democracy as participation of the people in the decision-making process, and there is a number of other definitions. Of course, this is one basic component, participation of people in the decision-making process, whatever that means, but active participation. In India, in Kerala, we have democracy participated in terms of one person, one vote. We know that there are many problems about the kind of democracy we have. Money power, muscle power, and so on are very quite rampant in such. We have also seen the US democracy on Capitol Hill this last January. We did see many such. So while there are weaknesses or problems in the liberal democracies or democracies as defined by the Department of Political Science in terms of participation of the people in the decision making. In China, of course, 93 million cadres decide what the rest of 1.47 billion people require. It is also, let me add another caveat here. Nearly 800,000 villages in China have relatively free and fair elections. I witnessed the elections in a village in China way back, relatively free and fair. But the fact of the matter is, Communist Party is not located at the village level. It is located at the county level upwards. So the concept of democracy then has to be redefined in the case of China. From the way they define, they mentioned inclusive, sustainable as aspects of democracy. There is also a subtle competition that is coming up. For example, Deng Xiaoping's secretary, Zhang Weiwei, he has a center in Fudan University in Shanghai, where he tries to apply the China model to the rest of the world, or how the rest of the world can study the China model. So Zhang Weiwei argued that, for instance, look at Indian democracy, it had not delivered people the economic aspects. For instance, we have a lot of poverty in China, in India. We have a lot of economic inequalities in India. So basically, export of China model is to suggest that, see, we have resolved the poverty problem. We have resolved the economic problem by having the second largest economy. And we delivered to the people on many issues. While look at Indian democracy, it had introduced democracy since 1937 and more prominently in 1950s. And see, look at the Indian democracy, they have not been able to deliver on HRD, human resource development, on healthcare, on poverty, on education, on other aspects. While we, as a Communist Party-led society, we have delivered all these. Now, there is a problem with that construct because increasingly since 19th Party Congress, they started exporting China model to the rest of the world and insisting that China model could be adopted by the rest of the world, especially in Africa and South America. So also their argument that they have actually resolved the poverty is problematic because in 2021, last year, when they said they built a well-off society, the poverty elevation is extreme poverty, not poverty as such. And secondly, they have not eliminated poverty in the urban areas where nearly 60% of the people live. Only 40% of people live in villages in China today. And extreme poverty is related to villages, not to the urban areas. Even assuming that their methodology for resolving poverty elevation is true, there are still a lot of problems in this assessment. For example, Premier Li Keqiang mentioned that 600 million people in China have less than $140. 600 million, that's nearly half of the population having less than $140. The UN estimates put $1.5 per day as the extreme poverty limit. $1.5 would be about 100 rupees, something like our MNREGA estimates of 100 rupees wage labor per day for public construction works in India. But we know that with 100 rupees, there is no way anyone can sustain. And because China is not a very transparent society, no free press, no alternative media, these aspects are difficult to objectively assess on whether they have actually resolved the poverty and so on. So when it comes to democracy, all these remain then rhetorical in nature, and this is problematic. On human rights as well, 6 countries in the world today, US, Canada, some European countries, they have put sanctions on Xinjiang on the human rights related, and they accuse China of putting in internment campaigns nearly 1 million Uyghurs. So there is a big explanation that China needs to make on the Xinjiang related or Tibet related or others. More transparency in China's intentions, capabilities, and allowing scholars to study these would enhance the credibility of China's rise. So on human rights and democracies, there are very many questions that China needs to explain to the international community if it wants to export the China model abroad.
Thank you, sir.